Let's take a look at the charts on EOS from this week's article on Brave New Coin. So EOS is a proof-of-stake network nestled in between ADA and Monero on the market cap table. All in all, my personal feelings regarding EOS is I expected more out of a $4 billion ICO, but maybe that's asking for too much. I don't know. I'll lay down why as we go through the charts here, but just expect more dev initiatives, more code-related things, more projects incentivized to be on EOS, that sort of thing. Overall, price-wise, it's just kind of diminished, whereas this cohort has risen. This has remained flat or declined. And oddly enough, EOS and LTC are typically pretty correlated, but they haven't been correlated over the past few months. If you look at the block producers for EOS, most of these are in China. Many of these are exchanges. There's all sorts of decentralization issues, both from a geographic, political, and just being an exchange. You're going to have your own opinions on governance versus the community. So all sorts of problems can arise in the future. Haven't necessarily arisen yet. There are issues that I lay out in the article about BitThumb trying to stuff ballots essentially to get their block producers on the list. So EOS has some issues with that, certainly. The other issue is they don't have many full nodes that I'm aware of. I don't know how many there are. I don't know how big the full nodes are. I don't know if anybody does. There might be like 1 or 2 full nodes. As of like many months ago, there were 4 maybe. It's weird that the main block producers aren't required to have a full node. You'd think that if you're earning money from EOS, you'd be required to have a full node. I'd expect, honestly, the top 100 block producers to have full nodes. But hey, that's just me. If you look at the GitHub commits, these have dropped off pretty dramatically since 2018. This is just one repo. Certainly they have like 100 something. So maybe I'm just not looking in the right place. I don't really value commits too highly anyway on a chain, regardless of what's going on. But it is something you can point to and say, well, what's going on here? You know, again, they have $4 billion. Maybe there's more in other repos I'm not seeing. Based on total notional value, EOS being staked is 4th behind DOT, ADA, and Tezos. It's ahead of Atom, Algo, AVAX. Still don't know what that is. Band, Dash, Tron, SNX, Kava, Waves. So it's still reasonably sized for a proof-of-stake network. If you look at transaction counts and block counts, they had a bit of an issue with the network getting bogged down late 2019 into 2020. And you can see the transactions just dropped way down. They've basically recovered now. They look much more organic than they did previously. Lots of bot activity, lots of stuff turning on and off randomly. You can clearly see the stark contrast. You know, maybe even this was more organic than what is currently the case. To see these drops and rises super quickly isn't necessarily normal activity, non-bot activity. If we look at dApps on EOS, the DEX is 10x the next biggest dApp. So new DEX is by volume, 10x DeFi's network. Never even heard of that. Haven't heard of most of these. Not that that means anything, but I don't hear a lot about dApps on EOS in general. A lot more gambling dApps than ETH because there's no fees on EOS. So it makes more sense for gambling stuff like dice games, whereas on ETH there would be higher fees, certainly. Mixture of exchanges, WhaleX, NewDex, some DeFi stuff. So it's not like the top dApps are just like disappearing into nothingness. I would just expect, if you're going to compete with ETH, you got to bring your A game, right? Even though most of the dApps on ETH are trash as well, they at least have many of them that are robust and being used and have a decent use case. Even though it's like locusts collecting funding from dApp to dApp and using ETH to fund stuff on other dApps, that's for a different article on a different day. But I expect more out of the biggest ICO ever, right? You just have to. You have to expect more. Here is the Google Trends for EOS.io, which isn't exactly a great measure for EOS, but you can see how it was peaking during the ICO, I think this was, and then it just kind of has done a bunch of nothing. So not a lot of search interest there for EOS. Looking at technicals, we have Bitfinex long-short ratio at the top, VPVR, volume profile of the visible range on the side here. the 50 green, 200 red EMA for trend determination, RSI, and volume. So on Bitfinex, volume has just dropped way down to basically nothing over the past few years. The trend itself has just been consolidating since 2019. Clearly a big volume node here at around 270. So historically, all of the trade history is just gathering around 270. As far as offside resistance, based on VPVR, 350, 5, 8. So those are on the way up. As well as the yearly pivot at 4, R1 at 7. So any of these local highs are going to be resistance. Any of these local lows are going to be support. Not a ton of volume support on the way down if the March lows break. So overall, it's just lukewarm on everything. Trend-wise, as it sits, is bearish, but all of these trends flips have kind of been light or mediocre. The short side of it, though, has lasted longer than the long side of it since 2019. So, I don't know. There's just nothing exciting about any of this from a trader's perspective as far as let me get an EOS or buy these lows or nothing. Bitfinex OI is interesting in that longs they've basically been rising since the beginning of the year, but price hasn't been. So there's some sort of divergence there. Longs are also near all-time highs here, which is kind of weird. Shorts definitely near all-time lows. If price does drop, you're looking at a long squeeze in legendary proportions. Now, most of these are long from, March-ish. So it would probably have to drop to like 140 or less for these longs to get nervous. But if price does drop that far, I'm thinking sub $1 for sure. No divs on any of that, by the way. And looking at the cloud, or not the cloud, but the pitchfork, it's a super clean pitchfork. It's actually eerily holding this channel quite well here. If it gets above 277, that's at the point where you can probably say, all right, I can step in and take a reasonable long here. But if it doesn't, it's headed to this median line as it's done several times before. Touch, 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 touch. So it's due for a touch if this bear trend holds. So you're either looking at prices above 277 for many days. This is the 2-day chart. So you can see how it briefly was above. It didn't really maintain that. So it's either got to hold above 277 for like 2 weeks to be convinced, or it's headed to 86 cents or lower, whatever the median line is at that time. So it's been bearish for, since 2018. There's just been no significant bull rally other than maybe late 2018 to early 2019. Looking at the cloud, it's also projecting bullish trends above 310. So between 277 and 310 is where I'd expect buyers to step in. You can see it's nowhere near that now. Cloud right now is super bear. So again, trend-wise, doesn't look good. Doesn't look good on the 50 to 200. Doesn't look good on the pitchfork. Doesn't look good on the cloud. Just doesn't look good at all any way you can measure it. And EOS BTC just looks absolutely demolished. It's had these stair steps all the way down. So it's probably going to reconsolidate at some point for an extended period of time, just as it did through 2019, through early 2020. When it finds a floor, it likes to hold there for like 8 months, 6 months. Just not convinced that the floor has necessarily been established yet. There's a decent VPVR node here, but this just looks like free fall to me. The TK lines are separating, but not super far. They're not flat. They're decently far away from the 200. I don't know. None of this looks like a buy or a knife catch to me. It all just looks bad. So nothing looks exciting from fundamentals or technicals to me for EOS. I don't see myself personally trading it anytime soon in the near future. So EOS really needs to step up its game. I think it's really only alive because of the market cap and because people look at it on a regular basis. Clearly there's a lot of DApp volume and there's some use cases there for gambling, but the coin, I'm concerned, definitely concerned at longevity, based on centralization of block producers, lack of anything from EOS.io. Maybe I'm just not in touch with what they're doing. Hopefully someone from EOS is going to comment and be angry at me and say, we're doing all this. I don't know. I just don't see it. So bearish fundamentals, bearish technicals.